Hey everyone, hi, welcome or welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be wrapping up all the books that I read in June. It is kind of a late wrap up for me, but you know, it's okay, it's fine. And I read quite a few. It's going to be weird, you know, all around. This video is going to be a little bit different all the way around, and we will get into that when we get into the meat of this video. But if you are new here, then hi, welcome. I'm Shelly, and I absolutely love books and reading with an intense passion, and I have a whole channel dedicated to this passion. If you like this kind of video, books, you know, wrapping up all the, you know, talking about all the books that I read in the month, that one reads in a month, and just general chattiness about one's love for books and reading, then perhaps you've found the right spot, and I would encourage you to subscribe, stick around. And now let's go ahead and get into the meat of this video. Here is why today is so strange. This wrap up is strange. I cannot talk about some of the books that I read because I read them as a judge for the Booktube Prize. The Booktube Prize is a literary prize ran here on Booktube, where we are encouraging bookish community members, online bookish community members, to judge fiction or nonfiction this year. And this year I was asked to judge, and I signed up for judging nonfiction. So, you know, which has been lovely. If you are interested in all of the books that I'm reading for this judging, I will leave that linked down below. But yeah, as far as, so I've read these books, but I can't talk about them in any kind of detail, because we're not supposed, as judges, we are not supposed to, you know, put out our opinions out there because we don't want to sway the other judges in case they come upon our videos. So I will say that I did read The Song of the Cell by Siddhartha Mukherjee. So this was one of the books that I read for the Booktube Prize. I also read The Facemaker by Lindsey Fitzharris. The reason why I'm going, as I throw the book on the ground, the reason why I'm going through it is because I do like, I don't know, I have this kind of, I like this, an accurate account of what I've read in the month, you know, more or less. And so I do want to just say that I have read them. Anyway, so I read The Facemaker by Lindsey Fitzharris. The Song of the Cell is about cellular biology and how that works. The Facemaker by Lindsey Fitzharris is about the advancements in plastic surgery during World War I. And I also read Paradise Falls by Keith O'Brien, and that is about a small town that is built on top of a chemical plant in New York City, or in New York, not New York City, but the outskirts of New York. And the way that women in the neighborhood banded together to create change after the effects of the chemicals came up and were really affecting the townspeople that were living on top of it. So on top of the chemical dumping plant, essentially. Those were the 3 books that I read for the Booktube Prize. If you want more nuanced and detailed thoughts, then I truly would recommend you to stick around because I'm pretty sure I'll have a whole video dedicated to what I think of all of these books and how well they were executed. So 3 more to go for the Booktube Prize, and I'm making my way through. All right, so then I feel like I have little groupings of books. Like my book groupings continue, not just with the Booktube Prize, but with other things as well. So I read 2 books. Oh my goodness, I'm gonna have to look it up. Give me a second. I read 2 books by Edward St. Aubyn, and they are the Patrick Melrose books. So I read the first book, which is Nevermind, and the second book, which is Bad News. It is a 5-book series, I believe, by Edward St. Aubyn. And I think this series got quite a bit of, you know, it had its first life when it was being written and published, and then it got a second life when there was an HBO or a series put out starring Benedict Cumberbatch as Patrick Melrose, and each episode of the show represented one book in the series. So it was a 5-episode miniseries starring the wonderful and incredible and amazing Benedict Cumberbatch. And you know, it was based on, or it was, you know, inspired by or retelling the events that are in these books. Okay, so what are these books about? So we have this young person, at least in the first book, Patrick Melrose, who is 5 years old. And in the first book, I thought it was in a lot of ways very brilliant, because it is a day in the life of Patrick Melrose. And though it's not really following him, it's following his extremely dysfunctional parents, extremely abusive parents, through their day as they get ready for a dinner party. And then it sort of culminates with this dinner party. And at this point, when we finally sit down to dinner, we've seen Patrick Melrose's parents and those who are attending the dinner, like the 4 other people attending the dinner and Patrick. And it comes together with this dinner party and it closes out the day, essentially. And so it wasn't until the end of the book that I was like, oh yeah, that took place over the course of a single day, which I really love books like that. There is Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf, which is like that, and Up at the Villa by M. Somerset Maugham, which is also set over the course of a single day. And I like books that take that approach and can do it well. And this book was done really well. There is trigger warnings, you know, trauma, in these books. I had prepared myself for the trauma, because as I was looking up the books to put on hold at my library, or I was trying to find the books, it states the trauma in like the Amazon overview if you get the 5-book bind up. So I knew what was coming, and it wasn't like the height of the book, you know, it wasn't the big reveal in the story. There is kind of like trauma drama throughout the book. However, I feel like that's really watering it down, because here's the deal. Book 1, Patrick Melrose, in the Patrick Melrose series. That's what I think of it as. I forget the name of it. Never mind, I think it's called. I don't know. Oh, I'm such a bad booktuber. So the first book in the Patrick Melrose series, I when I was reading it, I had this sense that we're following these people that are of wealth and have access to money, and they're terrible. And essentially in the book, it even states that some of these characters are amoral. There's just no morality, and what that leads the people to do and the dysfunctions of their lives. And it was, in a lot of ways, sort of a peep inside a world that was grimy and gross and disgusting, but like you're looking through this glass, you know, and you're like, I can't look away because it's just so interesting and intriguing and sucking me in. That was how I felt about it. Now, I read this with the Up to No Good book club, which has Sandy from Miss Reads a Lot, Fraser at Fraser Simons Springboard Thought. Actually, it's just Fraser Simons at the channel Springboard Thought, rather. Jolene at Bookworm Adventure Girl, and several friends, Deb, Angela, and Sonja. And so we all read this together, and there was mixed opinions about it. I think I'm certain that like one of the comments was, you know, you just follow around terrible people doing terrible things, and I don't want to read about that, you know, that kind of thing. There was like people who were very close to DNFing the book. There were a couple of people who didn't read it altogether because of the trauma drama that was spoken about. And so, you know, so it was mixed, but I was really enamored with St. Aubyn's writing. It was beautiful. I felt like he knew what he was doing. It was, in a lot of ways, thought-provoking, and it gave me that feeling where I was being really, like, sucked in. And I was like, I wonder what these terrible people are doing now. You know, like, what does this say about me? I have no idea. But I really was quite interested in, as I was reading it, I was really, like, enjoying what I was reading, and really you know, sort of sucked in. It captured my attention, and it not only captured it, but it kept it contained throughout the whole read. So then the second book in the series, Bad News, I jumped into right away. And at this point, we are meeting a 21-year-old Patrick Melrose. And at the very beginning, and I don't think this is a spoiler in the least, in the very first 3 pages, we find out that Patrick's father has died, who was a prominent character in the previous book. And Patrick Melrose is a drug addict. He's wealthy, a wealthy, spoiled little rich boy kind of thing. And he is completely and utterly addicted to all kinds of drugs. I want to make a video about all the best books on drugs, or the drug experience, because I have read quite a few, and this would make it into that video, because it provides the reader what it is like to be on a drug binge, but without having to take drugs yourself. You know, you're just following this character who's totally and completely addicted. So this worked less well for me, Bad News. It was hard to say it was a flop, because it wasn't to say it didn't work completely or something, because that's not true. There were parts of it that were really interesting, and I think it's just the kind of reader that I am. I have read books where people go straight, they're talking about this wild ride of looking for your next fix and trying to get it. I've read those books before, and so I thought reading Bad News was in some ways a variation on a theme of this kind of book that shows you the inner life of a drug addict, in a sense. And I thought it was showing us throughout the day, we were seeing what Patrick Melrose was doing, the choices that he was making in order to continue his drug binge going. But it didn't really get into why. I mean, you can suss out why, you can, the trauma that he's been through. But, it didn't really get into, I wanted to know more about his relationship with his father since we last saw him, since he was 5 years old. I wanted to know more about, what he's been up to. And instead, I didn't. I got kind of Edward St. Aubyn does the same thing, and it's we're checking in with Patrick Melrose over the course of, in this instance, it was over the course of a couple of days. We're checking in with Patrick, and I wanted to know, what has your relationship with your mother been like, and what's been going on in these 16 years. And I didn't feel as if I got that. I know it. I didn't get that. I got a wild ride of what it would be like to be a drug addict, which I've read before. Thank goodness I haven't experienced it, but I've read books like that. And so it didn't do anything new or interesting or give me anything juicy to sink my teeth into. I was oh, okay, so we're doing this. We're doing this. And at that point, I wasn't caring for Patrick, that I was so much so that I was oh, I hope he gets himself out of this, or I hope he doesn't make those decisions. It was sort of, I was a passive viewer on this wild ride that Patrick was on, and I kind of felt a little about the journey. So yeah, but I enjoyed him. I enjoyed both books. I want to read the third book. I'll probably, hopefully, pick it up this month in July, or in the early parts of August. And yeah, it was successful. It just wasn't, the first book far outshined the second book. That's the best way to say it. Next up, I have literary fiction books. So since we're doing things in little groupings, we have the Booktube Prize books, and then the Edward St. Aubyn, Patrick Melrose series books. And now I have 2 books that are, award-winning and, literary fiction in a sense. So the first one, I don't know which one to start. Okay, the first one I'll say was Emma Donohue's The Wonder. I read this with my friend Anita. This was my first foray into Emma Donoghue. And I'm one of those people that I can't get enough. Well, I can, but I mean, I can't get enough of Steve Donoghue. So like, I'm like, Steve Donoghue's best books of 2015, and that's what what I'm trying to say is that The Wonder was Steve Donoghue's favorite book of the year that it came out, according to his past blogs, you know. And here's what I'll have to say about it. So this English nurse, this is set in like, I think the 1800s-ish. We'll say that. and this English nurse gets hired to go to this very tiny Irish town in which a very young girl, it is being rumored that she hasn't eaten in months. And that she is this divine being. And so this committee of the town comes together and hires a couple of nurses to watch this young girl around the clock for 2 weeks in order to determine if this girl is from divinity or if she is just putting on a show. And what I loved about this was that, you know, you have this premise and then we're following this incredibly skeptical and quite harsh nurse. She is like checking everything, checking the floor, checking the walls. She is looking in every nook and cranny. And she's really racking her brain to see if this young girl is actually, you know, consuming food in some sneaky way, or if she is of a sort of divinity, if she is a divine creature and doing this, doing this somehow because of like magical or religious reasons, you know, and so that is really interesting. That perspective was really great because in a lot of ways, if Emma Donoghue had written our nurse, who is Lib, that's right, if she had written Lib as a bit of a softer character, I would have been like, well, what about hiding the food under your mattress? Are the walls edible? You know, I, as a reader, would have been skeptical, but instead Lib was so skeptical. She had so many questions that it made me like go, you know, yeah, you're thinking of the things that, you know, both I would have thought of and I wouldn't have thought of, you know, that kind of thing. And, you know, relationships develop, and the way everything unfolds and the pacing of this book was so good. It was like perfectly well done, didn't overstay its welcome. There weren't really any slow bits. I mean, it wasn't a tremendously long book. I actually quite dislike this oversized. I like oversized paperbacks of this. Like, here's the next book I'm going to talk about, Lonesome Dove. And Lonesome Dove is quite a bit small, like shorter. It's a bit shorter. Let's see, line them up. It's a bit shorter than The Wonder. I don't mind this size when it's also quite thick, when it's a thick book. But this is a very thin book. And so I just didn't love the format of this. Okay, I'm going to get that out of the way. I didn't love the format of this. However, the way the story was told, the way that it unfolded, the way that it played out, very satisfying. Very, very, very satisfying. And so it actually really quite turned me on to Emma Donoghue. I was like, oh, I could see why there are fans of hers, and that she is, you know, a very, you know, a successful writer in this day and age. I really quite liked it. So, success. I don't know if I'm going to like run out and, you know, try and read another Emma Donoghue right away. But I definitely won't shy away from a book. I wouldn't have any qualms with her writing in the future. Like, there was nothing that put me off to her, and I'm actually, you know, very open to reading her in the future, if that makes sense. I've already showed you the next book, but the next book is Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry. So, I read this with Mark at Book Time with Elvis, who is a lovely, oh my goodness, as I'm talking about this, I don't think I said, well, I kind of said, but I did read I'm going to set this down. I did read the Patrick Melrose books with Fraser, and he was a great person to talk to about those books, and we had a little bit of differing opinions, I think, on those books, which was nice. I think we both felt very similarly about the first book. We were just enamored with his writing. In the second book, I think I tended to feel a bit more meh, a bit more blasé about it than Fraser. Okay, I just wanted to give credit where credit is due. Okay, so I read Lonesome Dove with Mark at Book Time with Elvis. We had some great conversations about this book, and we recorded one of our conversations on Mark's channel, which I will leave that linked down below. But know that there are full spoilers for Lonesome Dove in that video. So just, I think, you know, we kind of dance around some of the spoilers, but for the most part, there are spoilers in the video. So watch at your own risk is what I'll say. But it was lovely talking to Mark about Lonesome Dove, both in private and in public. Okay, so Lonesome Dove, we are following a bunch of cowboys living in a town called Lonesome Dove, and they are taking a huge, massive amounts of cattle and trying to take them from Texas to Montana, and the adventure begins, although it begins way before then as well. Really, I think Larry McMurtry's writing is magical. Magical, especially when it comes to characters. The characters, the dialogue, the depth of all the characters, the way they interact with one another, the way that they're just so good. They're so good. In terms of plot and the way everything came together, I would say that it was kind of run-of-the-mill. I mean, there were a lot of plot points that surprised me, that were intriguing, that shocked me. But I don't know, in terms of plot, I just feel like it was tropey. I talked about Lonesome Dove with Fraser on our Tops and Flops. I will leave that link down below too. No spoilers in that. But it did have a sense of it being tropey. But here's the thing. I don't know how to say. Okay, I'm just gonna. It's not a spoiler, but characters die. Characters die, and it does have a weird sense. It has a weird sense that Larry McMurtry was just killing off characters. And the thing that made me kind of mad at this book was that he was so good at creating characters that I loved, that Mark loved, that we all loved. I mean, one of the main characters, Gus, I mean, I could blush thinking about him because he is just so wonderful. I mean, I don't develop literary crushes on characters. I just don't. But I did with Gus. I was like, oh, Gus. I'm like, be still my ever-beating heart, sweet Gus. I loved him. I loved him. And, you know, and so it takes a special kind of writer, right? It takes a special kind of writer to be able to create incredible, deep, complicated, wonderful, not too serious characters. Like, there was a lot of humor inserted in this book. There was like a lot of characters that had a lot of humor. There was just a lot going on. And then it felt like when you make these characters that don't feel flat, that feel fully alive and fully thought through, and that I love, right? And then there were just times where a certain character would just die in kind of a brutal and unfair way. And that just bugged me, you know? Like, have some reverence for your creations, sir. That's how I felt. And so, was this an incredible read? Yes. Was it worth the 900 or 850 pages that it is? Yes, it absolutely. This is an incredible book. It's fantastic. However, the sort of mean way that McMurtry treats some of his characters, the certain, the things that weren't tied up in this book, the fact that some of the creatures, the four-legged creatures, die in kind of brutal and utilitarian ways, it doesn't make me want to pick up Larry McMurtry. At least this particular series. I know that Larry McMurtry had a long writing career, And if he has books out there, which I think he does, I think he wrote Terms of Endearment. I don't know. I think he wrote Terms of Endearment. He's written quite a bit. And so I would be more apt to pick up a book that was lighter, that had that feel to it, where I'm less trepidatious to love a character because I'm going to be like heartbroken in the end. Yeah, I think that, you know, that kind of sums up where I'm at. So this is a quintet or a quartet. I'm not really sure. It's one of those. This is one book in a series of books. And I just, you know, I don't want to read any more from any more from it, okay? Because I don't want my heart to be crushed into a million pieces. So as a book, it was fantastic. Was it perfect? No, you know. So yeah, anyways, great. Just so good. My last two books are pretty, you know, my last two books are graphic novels. And they were fantastic. The first one was Who Owns the Clouds? And this is by Gerard Dubois. The illustrations are by Gerard Dubois, who has written one of my favorite picture books of all time, The Other Side of the Forest, which was one of the New York Times Best Illustrated Picture Books in 2021. I made a video about that list. I will leave that video linked down below and I will timestamp it. I don't know if I can do this. I don't know. I will leave the video link down below and I will perhaps timestamp it to when this book shows, this illustrator shows up. Anyways, gosh, that was yammering on. This tells a story, a very sparsely written story about the traumas of a decimated city, a city decimated by war. But the illustrations, oh my gosh, they're so good. They're so good. I hope Gerard Dubois has a long and lustrous career because I loved the illustrations. They were so good. Hopefully I'm sort of inserting images as I'm talking right now. A feast for the eyes for those who just love gorgeous illustrations. And it has this very like vintage, the illustrations have a very vintage feel. For the most part, they're in black and white or black and tan, and then there's a pop of red. And it's just beautiful. I mean, it's so good and so unique. And I had read about this book a long time ago and I wanted to get my hands on it, and I'm so glad that I did. And then my final book is a graphic novel for young people, and it's called The Postman from Space. This is by Guillemette Perreault, translated by Francois Bouy. Actually, they're both of these books are Canadian authors and illustrators. The Postman from Outer Space is about a postman whose route changes. And it's silly, it's funny, it's adorable. I love the illustrations. And an absolute delight. Silly, just so silly. I really loved it. I loved it so much. I love the color palette. It has these, it's a richness to it, but it's also not overdone. And I just loved it. I thought it was so sweet. So that is everything that I've read in the last, in June. Yeah, anyways, that's it from me. I want to hear, what did you read this past month? Any standout reads? I would love to know that. But otherwise, you know, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for being here and spending this time with me. I do appreciate it. It always amazes me at, you know, your willingness to hang out. Yeah, it delights me. I could get kind of choked up talking about it, but it really delights me that you all are so willing to just hang out with me and listen to me talk about books. So thank you so much for that. I truly appreciate it. Yeah, and I'm gonna go. I will see you all hopefully in my next one.